Hello, scholars. This video is about the 8 enduring principles of learning. And specifically today, we're going to practice and look at principle 4, challenging activities, teaching complex thinking. Okay, so we're looking at each of the 8 enduring principles of learning so that when we're analyzing teachers' teaching, we can look to see what are they doing in their pedagogy? How are they interacting with their students and delivering their lessons? How are they fostering learning for all learners? So we should see some examples of each of the principles of enduring learning in their teaching every day. So as you know, we have organized in our comparative frameworks chart the principles from different frameworks of exemplary teaching. We looked at Dr. Timont, we looked at Dr. Goldie Muhammad, we looked at Dr. Zarita Hammond's work, and we fit all of their principles under the umbrella of Dr. Ladson-Billings' 3 principles of successful teaching for all learners: high levels of academic achievement, high levels of cultural competence, and high levels of criticality. So the complex thinking, principle 4, does fit into Gloria Ladson-Billings' 3 main principles. And some of the activities will have all of the cultural competence, the criticality, and the higher order thinking skills, the high levels of achievement in one lesson. They don't always do that, and they don't have to do that. But the more that you can make sure that these enduring principles are in your teaching and learning activities, the more that you are going to be able to ensure that you're providing quality education for all learners. You're a dream keeper, not a dream wrecker. The educational pipeline's already leaking, so we don't need more people helping to help that leak stay open. We're actually trying to work against the leak so that all learners have access to quality educational opportunities, outcomes, and experiences. So what does principle 4 look like? I'm going to share my screen with you. And let's just read what principle 4 says to get a little context for what we're looking for. Okay, you should be looking at this brief, and this should be very familiar to you by now. Okay, so we've done principle 1, joint productive activity. We know that the students and teachers, and sometimes just the students, are working together to create something. They're doing some activity to produce something. That's higher order thinking as well, but their focus is on that they are jointly producing something. And we're going to talk more about language and literacy development. And we'll talk about contextualization. So we're going to focus on challenging activities. We've already talked about critical stance and principle 8, which is student-directed activity. Okay, so what is principle 4? Challenging activities, teaching complex thinking. Challenge students toward cognitive complexity. Okay, now you don't start out doing multiplication without already knowing your addition and subtraction facts, right? But the problem that sometimes teachers run into, particularly if they're working with students from minoritized backgrounds and low-income areas, sometimes they do this drill and kill pedagogy where they're like, they won't let students do higher order thinking and complex thinking because they'll say, well, the kids don't even know their basic facts, so I can't do anything higher order with them. So the one thing that you need to think about with that is sometimes when we take particular skills out of their context, they don't make any sense. And so just like the rest of us, children and adolescents want to make meaning out of things, and we don't like to do things that don't make sense to us or seem like a waste of time. So they're like that, we're like that, nothing wrong with that. So as a teacher, you're thinking, well, does this skill make sense? So if it's a lower order thinking skill, do the students understand how it's tied to something that's more complex? For example, when I was a child and I was in elementary school, I was a very good reader. I always wanted to read. And so when I learned to read in first grade, I was so excited and I read all the time. And luckily, my mom was such that she loved to read. So she would take me to the library and let me check out books. And I got books for Christmas and holidays and birthdays and things like that. So I was really fortunate that way. And so when I got to school at school, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, I remember having to do phonics workbooks. I had no idea that the phonics workbooks were supposed to help me be a better reader. I didn't associate the two as connected. I was a good reader. And so when I had to like short A, long A, I didn't even really get that those things were supposed to be connected to reading. And so just because I was a fairly obedient child when I was quite young, I just did it because the teacher said so, not because it made any sense to me. But not all kids are like that. Some kids are like, what's this for? This is stupid. I don't want to do it. It doesn't make any sense. And they're right. It doesn't make any sense. Like, who sits around and goes, oh, long A? Nobody, right? If you're a good reader, you don't do that. You don't slow down for that. So they have their points with that. Another example would be like, why would you practice steering a bicycle steering wheel, the handlebars? Why would you just practice just that? It doesn't really make any sense unless you're trying to do it in the larger context of riding a bike. So sometimes the smaller skills make more sense in the bigger picture. So think about that with complex thinking with this principle. I can remember as a second grade teacher, I worked so hard to get my second graders to understand the possessive S. Do you put the apostrophe before the S or after the S? And I can remember drawing pictures on the board of the dog's bones to see where the apostrophe goes, and they didn't get it. And it wasn't just that my drawings were not that good, and we tried different things, but it didn't make a lot of sense to them. So once I had them writing their own stories and they actually needed the apostrophe S, then suddenly they had a need to know and they picked it up really easily. So what I had been trying to do was just drill and kill that skill outside of the context of it. So, I was beating my head against the wall, and my little 8 and 9-year-olds were like, this makes no sense. It's not only boring, but I don't get it. I don't know. Put the apostrophe here, put it there, whatever, random. You got a 50-50 chance for either, right? So it didn't make any sense. Once they needed it as authors and writers themselves, they picked it up right away. So that's what I'd like you to think about with challenging activities and complex thinking. Think about how those lower level skills sometimes fit into the bigger ones. You need to develop those lower level skills so that they can more efficiently do the complex thinking, but they should be able to see, like, if you're modeling complex thinking and you're guiding them to do complex thinking, then when you actually ask them to do independent thinking, they might be a little nervous at first, but they've already seen it, they've experienced it with your support or a peer's support. And so it's not a huge leap of faith to be trying it on their own. Okay, so let me see if I can stop sharing my screen here. And I want to put one of our videos from our Canvas course onto the screen for you and share that with you. Okay, so if we're going to analyze this teacher here, her teaching, let's see if we can find out a little bit about complex thinking. Let's have her get started.
Okay, so her name's left. Is anyone yes?
I said,
Okay, one thing that she's doing right there is she's reviewing. She's calling into students' mind their background knowledge. What did we do yesterday? So she's starting out really well with bringing the students' background knowledge to the beginning of this lesson.
So if I review this problem, 5 plus 3, who can tell me the answer? Remember not to shout it out. Who can raise their hand? Have a few minutes, think about it. It's not a race. Draw it out and who can get the answer. Keyshawn.
is it 7?
No? Think about it a little more. Try again.
Okay. One thing that I like about, or I find helpful, I shouldn't say I like it because it really doesn't matter if I like it or not, but we're looking to see what's effective and what's not effective. So, pardon me for saying I like. So one thing that was very effective in her teaching there, did you notice that she said that they could draw it out? When you're looking at numbers, like, see, she had the 5 and the plus the 3, the 5, the plus sign, the 3, the equal sign, those are all symbols. So that's really higher order thinking from the concrete. If I had 5 cookies sitting right here, and then I'm going to put 3 more cookies together, that's really concrete, but the 5 is a symbol that shows those 5 cookies. So that's higher order thinking. And sometimes, using symbols, that can be a little bit of a transition for students, but it's not a hard one in the sense that if you think about, you drive by, in most cities, you drive by a fast food restaurant and they have a big golden arches, and even kids that don't go to school, they know what that the golden arches mean. They're like, that's McDonald's, and they know that symbol right away. So it's not that symbols are hard, but sometimes you do have to transition from more concrete to the more symbolic, and she allowed for that to happen right there. So let's see what else she says.
Need a friend to help you?
Yeah.
Hey, you think you can help him out?
Yeah, when you do it, yeah, it's like you have 5, so you have to start with 5,
Okay.
and then you have to add 3 more. So you gotta add 3 more figures. So
Right.
you have 5 and then you go 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
And then you come.
Okay, so here one thing that's very effective, what the teacher's doing, is she doesn't consider the students to be cheating when they're talking together and helping. That's kind of a very white middle class sort of a thing, to think that you have to always do things on your own, where she doesn't restrict it to that. They can work together and have those social relationships, and they're using the student on the left is using his language to think it aloud, so that the other student can access how the first student, how his thinking went for him to arrive at that answer. So this teacher has allowed for them to not only draw it, which is very helpful for some learners, but she's also allowed them to talk and collaborate together. And so she doesn't consider that cheating. And that's good, because, really, like, what does that mean, cheating? That we want people to be collaborative. So she does allow that, particularly if you have learners with they're acquiring English as a second language, things like that. They have opportunities to use their language and to articulate it. And so you might think, well, the student on the left is getting the short end of the deal because he's having to support the student on the right. Well, that's not really true either, because if you have to articulate to someone else and teach them, it requires you to use some higher order thinking, and helps you to reinforce and learn more about what you're trying to share with others. So both of them are actually learning together. The one thing that I have a big problem with, and I don't know if this video is like they're just maybe making a skit and they're trying to act something out. I don't know. I don't know if this is an actual classroom. I hope it's not, because look at how the students seem to be, they look to me like they're either middle school students, or maybe freshmen and or sophomores in high school. They're not in second or third grade, that's for sure. So the the math level that they're learning, like, that would be appropriate for kindergarten or first grade. So I'm not sure, why they are doing an addition lesson here, but that is most certainly not complex thinking. As far as, would this be an example of a challenging activity? No, it would not. So, because you've got these learners who are maybe 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, and they're doing that kind of basic math operations like addition. They should be at that age group, they should have access to higher order. They should be learning to do beginning algebra by now. So this is what really, really low, as far as low level introductory mathematical concepts. That's, not appropriate. So if these students were my students, and I don't know, maybe they're in a classroom that is special needs. I'm not sure, what the background of this lesson is, but no matter what it is, let's say that they are just learning English as a second language. If they are learning English as a second language, it is actually against the law to be presenting students like that, such low level activities. They need to have age appropriate content. So if you need to do a little review, like this kind of a lesson, to get them to age appropriate level, then, that's not breaking the law. But what is breaking the law with English language learners, and this happens still today in far too many classrooms, is that teachers will put the English language learners in some corner of the room and have them coloring or doing some simple, like really primary activity, and just leave them doing that. They're coloring while the rest of the kids are doing something else that's much more complex, higher order thinking skill. That's definitely against the law. Okay, so if you have to scaffold things, no, that's fine. But one thing that might be really helpful to this teacher here would be if she could do something with joint productive activity, then that the students are still learning some basic math skills. Like, think about if they were trying to build something or buy something for their classroom, and they needed to use basic addition facts to complete their joint productive activity. That would be something that's higher order thinking skills, and they're putting that basic addition facts into their joint productive activity. Do you see what I'm saying? So you can get your basic math skills in, because maybe you're saying, well, they don't know how to do their basic math. The child on the right is still having trouble adding 5 plus 3. Okay, so you could be doing some sort of a joint productive activity with the class or in small groups, where the bigger project requires these basic addition skills. Do you see what I'm saying? So you're putting that in the context. So here I am using principle 3, I'm contextualizing it. And I'm also talking about my what we're trying to develop here. So I'm using language to learn. And then that's principle 2. And then I'm using principle 1 because we're creating something together. So I can reach that higher order thinking skills by using those other things. And I could even fit criticality into this, in the sense that I could say, as I did say with some of my students in elementary school, why are the students in our school not allowed to take books home from our school library? And how come we don't have books that reflect the people in our classroom, in our school? So how many books do we have? How many groups do we have represented in our class and in our school? You could put a lot of addition there, and you would have criticality in that as well. And you could even put some options in there where you have student directed activity too. Do you see what I'm saying? So a lot of times what I see in classrooms, and not just in schools that serve minoritized students, but sometimes in schools that serve students from rural areas, like Southern Utah is very rural. Sometimes you see a lot of really mundane, lower level thinking skills. I've seen high school students sitting through 90 minutes of really a vocabulary test, and the teacher will say something like, the word is curt. I used a curt tone when I responded to my neighbor. Curt. Can you imagine 90 minutes of that? That is not complex thinking at all. And those students were so good. I couldn't believe how good they were. They were so patient, just sitting in their seats, writing the word curt down. And there was, for 90 minutes, there was not even a shred of complex thinking. And so those students, their time was completely wasted. And so you might say, well, that's on their standardized test that they have to pass. Well, so what? Can't you put it in some higher order thinking skill that they would have to use those words in there? I mean, I cannot think of a bigger waste of students' time than to sit there and kill and drill. I mean, some students, they would get in big trouble, I know, because they would start acting out. I can think of classrooms that I've been in Alabama, and they would never sit so quietly and just endure that kind of low level thinking the whole time. They would be bored and they would say so, and they would start acting up, and I'm sure they would get in trouble for it, which would be bad. So I don't know, I don't know, it doesn't work out very well for the students here in either case. If the students start acting out and they're like, this is as boring as all get out, and so they start raising the roof, then, they've disrupted that kind of lower level thinking that, but then they get in trouble. But also the students that I've seen in these rural classrooms, where they're sitting there enduring 90 minutes of like a spelling test, and they just endure it, then you see that going to school is not about an education, but it's about a test of endurance. So does your classroom have age appropriate higher order thinking skills? Like I used to teach kindergarten. So what I can do with kindergartners that's age appropriate and developmentally appropriate is different than it would be in high school, but never estimate how bright learners are. Kindergartners are oftentimes just they amaze the adults around them, because the adults will tend to have lower expectations for them. And even elementary school, the students, I hear teachers and teacher educators all the time say, well, the kids don't notice that. Well, actually, if you listen to what they just said to you, they do notice it. They're looking around their world that they're curious about, and they ask questions. And a lot of times adults will shut that down in them, will say, shh, don't talk like that. Don't say that. And so they learn to internalize it and learn to shut it down and not ask it and be quiet about it. But that's not really healthy. Why do we do these things? So a lot of times the younger ones will ask that, and they're very bright, very capable. And then we have to remember that they're still growing, still developing. And so a lot of times their things are very concrete. And so I know with my son, he came home from school, and his teacher had told him that it was okay if he colored his little boy in the picture with a brown crayon, since he's Latinx. And so he didn't really see himself as being that color of brown, but he was just humoring his teacher. So he was very concrete. He was looking at his skin, and it was like it didn't match the color brown there. So he was very concrete. Do you see what I'm saying? So you have to think about, how do bodies and minds develop as we're getting older? And yet we still want to have that zone of proximal development, right? Where we're like encouraging them, supporting them to keep growing, keep learning, keep developing. And we should definitely not be wasting learners' time where they're just sitting there with these lower level activities. They should have complex thinking very regularly in their classroom. If I visited your classroom and I go through a full day in your classroom and I don't see any complex thinking, I'm going to wonder about you. I'm going to wonder about your teaching. Like, are you a dream keeper or a dream wrecker? If you're in a high school class and you're only teaching that group for an hour, and then I see your session, your class period over a week, your hour, and I don't see any complex thinking in there, I'm definitely going to be wondering, because these young people are really very capable now. And if you are not developing their skills and giving them opportunities to learn and practice and grow, what are you doing? And so complex thinking is something that seems so simple, so obvious, but it is not that obvious. You have to be very intentional about creating complex thinking in your work and in your teaching and learning approach. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for listening. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to end our video. Thank you.